that caused a needle of a compass to spin and spin.
Wow.
But it dropped down when it was moved away from those spots to another area of the vehicle. There were many, many mysteries. Betty and Barney felt contaminated. They felt dirty. They took long showers. They were upset about all of this. They were afraid they'd been contaminated, and Betty called the Air Force and made an official Blue Book report. She started to read about UFOs. She took a book out of the library because she knew practically nothing about the subject, and found NICAP's address and wrote a letter to them telling them about Barney's observation of the non-human beings on the craft and how he was so deeply disturbed by this. So the whole incident started to unfold at that point. I was 13 years old. I saw the evidence. I heard the story immediately. My mother was the first person that Betty called. We were at their house within 2 days of the incident.
Wow.
So from day one, I saw the unfolding of this event. But it wasn't until 1990, I guess, that I really started my intensive investigation with Betty's help.
What an incredible story.
And, in 1995, she turned the hypnosis tapes over to me.
Yeah.
And I transcribed all of them for comparative analysis. I wanted to know if the abduction experience itself was real, or whether or not Betty had merely had a series of dreams that she relived under hypnosis, and whether or not Barney had somehow absorbed the information in these dreams, although he denied having knowledge of all of the information in them, that perhaps Barney had absorbed this information, and perhaps under hypnosis he had relived Betty's dreams. And in the end, I found out that there was correlating data, which is in social science, would be scientific evidence that this, at least part of this abduction, was a real event.
That's probably a good segue to take a little breather for a second, and we'll come back after a brief break. What do you think of that Kathleen Marden interview? Pretty phenomenal stuff. It's fantastic. The Betty and Barney Hills story is a really amazing story. The first real abduction case to really just hit the media and hit it hard and throw everyone for a loop. Like I said earlier, it was adapted into a movie called The UFO Incident, where, you know, as Hollywood usually does, it embellishes a bit, and not everything is exactly as it was in the true story. Much like the Travis Walton story in Fire in the Sky, there are a lot of differences between the story and the movie. But nonetheless, check it out. I guess the only place to look for it is on YouTube, according to Kathy. I can't find it anywhere else. And so check it out there. We're going to return in a minute and get back into the interview. There's still lots to come. We have Sylvia Richards on the COP, Calendar of the Paranormal. We've got the Exopolitical Pulse and the SciTech News, of course. And don't forget, we have a listener's letter, Michael, of his experience of the cabin entity, right here on Unified Field Radio. It's Saturday night on 88.1 FM.
The world will never be the same. You're listening to the Unified Field.
UFR will return. Spell rhythm. C-A-D-U-F-N.
Experience the Caribbean and India without the airfare. Rani's Curry and Roti Shop serves up authentic Caribbean and Indian food. Rennie's has all your favorites. Curried chicken, beef, mutton, goat, buttered chicken, chickpea, and potato are all available in a roti wrap. Rennie's is the real deal. It's real with imported ingredients and a deal with $5 lunch specials and a 10% student discount. So come on down to Rennie's at 5280 Green Street, just off Queen, and experience authentic curry and roti for yourself.
You are listening to the Unified Field.
Hi, I'm Stanton Friedman. You're listening to Atlantic Canada's only paranormal radio broadcast on the Unified Field on CKDU.
A pachyderm on PCP, remarkable since A3. Been stressing refrigerators, holding my own to rock these mics through sacrifices, sleepless nights. Not materialistic, but my material is a triumphant through joys and pain. Not chasing the fame, but enhancing the frame. Gun barrel orphan, feverish, animated, inflammatory, fluent, lighter fluid to barbecue it. Hotter than hell on a holiday, like a stalk at the liver. When the spine gets slinky, the snake hip slither, cadence contortionist, pitch perfect performance. Set upset, slow, it's when I spit. Impatient, less alert, intelligent. Your sound shut down. It sounds best when there's no one around. Unstoppable with no breaks, mistakes and all. I look life in the eye. In spite of it, they beg for reminders of putting cigarettes out in your corner. You've been down to get up. Pay my way with a grenade and break my bad claw grizzly. Like a period on white skirts, no question. I left an impression and grabbed your attention and tapped you subtle on the shoulder with a sledgehammer. Emergent moves with ease. Grab your hands high.
Right on. Beans, Walking by Night. I love it. Welcome back to the Unified Field. And I'm Justin Brown. I'm your host of Atlantic Canada's only paranormal radio broadcast. I have the greatest convenience store in Halifax right at the corner of my street. Mr. John owns AAA Variety Convenience right on the corner of Jubilee, and it is fantastic. You got to stop in there and support John and his local business. He just gave me a free ice cream sandwich. Thanks, John. Hope you're listening. Anyway, let's get back to the program here. We got the fantastic Kathleen Marden interview here on the Unified Field.
You said that their initial description of the craft was... Did he think initially that it was cigar-shaped? Because later you said it was saucer-shaped.
Yes, initially, as it was at a distance, Betty and Barney were observing the row of lights on the forward side of the craft.
Right.
And so that row of lights caused it to appear to be cigar-shaped when it was at a distance.
I see.
But as it drew closer, and they were actually able to observe it close up, initially at a distance of only 200 feet away, and then Barney observed it when it was approximately 50 feet away. Yeah. They realized that it was disc-shaped at that point.
Yeah, there's something very interesting that takes place here, I think, when Barney grabs his binoculars to look at the craft when it's at that close distance. And the fact that he can see them moving around in there very plainly, and then for them not to really care about it, that he was looking, seems to indicate that this may have been a very new experience for them as well, or that they were underestimating the capabilities of humans, with simple technology such as binoculars. I find it a little interesting that they seem a little inexperienced there, because nowadays everybody is so in tune with the phenomenon that they just disappear. They cloak themselves at every possible opportunity, it seems.
Well, I do believe that you have a very good point, and I do believe that they were inexperienced, and I believe that is why there was so much physical evidence that this event occurred. I think that they really did a good job at improving their technique as time went on.
It certainly does seem sloppy.
Many people do not observe the non-human entities, but some people still do. We still do have abduction experiences where people are stopped in their vehicles, have a close-up UFO encounter and do observe the non-human entities before an abduction.
That is true. That is true. However, the screening technology, whatever that may be, seems to have improved as well, because I find a lot of times now that information of seeing the craft before the experience only really comes out under hypnosis in a lot of cases, it would seem. So there is, it's interesting to note that there seems to be a necessity of improving the technology as humans become more amalgamated and desensitized to the phenomenon as of late. I mean, evidence will suggest that entities have been visiting our planet since the beginning. And some even indicate, such as Mac Tony's, that they may not be extraterrestrial but crypto-terrestrial, coming from here for a number of different reasons, those of which we won't get into because that's a whole other show. This story is, it plays itself out beautifully. It is such an amazing story, and the way you relate it really helps to paint a very detailed picture that I think a lot of abduction cases seem to lack. Now, there's a whole lot more that becomes uncovered as the story progresses. Could we go into that, Kathy, about what was unveiled under hypnosis?
Yes, Betty and Barney were hypnotized separately by Dr. Benjamin Simon. This wasn't just one hypnosis session. These sessions and hypnotherapy went on for a period of 6 months. Betty and Barney drove from Portsmouth, New Hampshire to Dr. Benjamin Simon's office in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, he was a renowned psychiatrist and neurologist. During World War II, he had set up the psychiatric unit at the Mason General Hospital on Long Island, New York, and he worked very successfly with shell shock victims who were returning from the war, what we would now call post-traumatic stress disorder. He used hypnotherapy on them to resolve hysteria symptoms that they were having. Perhaps they were blinded without physiological reason or crippled or whatever. And he helped them to return to a normal, productive life. So he was a perfect person for Betty and Barney to be referred to. They saw him for the first time in January of 1964. Now, the incident happened in September of 61, so there was a time period before they were referred to him. He knew almost nothing about UFOs, but he had an excellent reputation for what he did. He hypnotized them separately, and under hypnosis, they both gave correlating information about their entire trip up to the UFO abduction itself. And in terms of the UFO abduction, they both gave very closely correlating information about what they experienced together and what they experienced separately. Together, they said that they were driving. They were suddenly on a road that they didn't recognize. There were tall trees all around. Barney had to suddenly make a sharp left-hand turn, and he said, "I don't know why I had to make that turn." It seems as if he was being controlled as he was driving the vehicle.
Interesting.
There were men in the road. Now, in Betty's dream, she said that there were 8 to 11 men in the road, and they surrounded the car as she and Barney sat silently. What I found, and what was on the hypnosis tape, is completely different. She said, and he said, that there were men in the road, that they divided into 2 groups of 3, that 3 approached Barney's door, 3 approached her door. Initially, they didn't know what it was. Was it an accident ahead? Were they being robbed? What was going on? But as these non-human entities approached the vehicle, Betty and Barney both were alarmed. Betty grabbed the door handle, and she was going to flee into the woods. Barney thought about taking taking his gun and decided not to. They did talk to each other about what was going on.